The September 21st, 2022 meeting of the Geneva Area City School Board of Education. I'd like to welcome all of those in attendance tonight. Mr. Lillie, roll call.
Mr. Arndt?
Present.
Ms. Fisher?
Here.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes, here.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Here.
And Mrs. Ortiz?
Present.
And are we in compliance this evening?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'd like for you all to stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Annie Bryan, 1968 to 2022. Patient, kind, selfless, caring, nurturing, loving, compassionate, amazing. Mrs. Annie Bryan, gone too soon. She will be missed by all who had the pleasure of knowing her. She was one of a kind, an angel among us. No words can describe how truly phenomenal she was, and how fortunate we are to have experienced her kindness for 27 years. We'd like to take a moment of silence. On behalf of the entire Board of Education, we want to extend our condolences to her family.
Thank you, Mrs. Ortiz. Is there any correspondence this evening?
Yes, I had received emails on a variety of topics, including student and staff issues, busing, Chromebook insurance, masking, and a time capsule request. All were either responded to or directed to the supervisor administrators to address.
And are there any agenda modifications this evening?
Yes, there are two. There is an addition to N13.6 and an addition to N13.10.
We've arrived at the hearing of the public. This time period will last for 30 minutes. Each speaker that would like to address the board can step up to the microphone. You'll have 5 minutes each to speak. You will be alerted at a 30-second time frame remaining, and we'd ask that you state your name and address when you step up to the mic.
Yeah, my name is Rich Prouty. I have 3 students at Geneva Schools. I live in Austinburg on 3094 Doral Drive, if anybody needs to know. Okay. I'm here to either confirm or squelch a rumor that they may be putting litter boxes in the restrooms.
Litter boxes?
Yes,
That would be a rumor.
that would be a rumor, so that it's not going to happen.
This is the first that I'm even hearing about it.
Okay, it's happened at other schools, so it's a sanitary concern. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
That was weird. He said litter, like cat litter.
Jack Dubsky, 142 Lockwood Street, Geneva, Ohio. I have a first grade son at Austinburg Elementary. You know, and I'd rather be at home sitting watching paint dry than standing up here right now talking to a bunch of people that don't care what the public has to say in the first place. You've proven that. I've been attending meetings regularly since October of 2021, and I've kept quiet. I sat, I listened. You know, the arrogance and inattentiveness of this board and superintendent, you should be ashamed of yourselves. You all need replaced. I'm here tonight because, and I'm speaking out tonight because tonight it's personal for me. My son was born hearing impaired. He's supposed to be getting speech services. Last year he wasn't getting them. I had to request an IEP meeting and bring in an advocate and tighten up the verbiage in his IEP. And like a fool, I walked out of there thinking, they're going to handle this. They're going to do the right thing. My son comes home last Friday and tells me, Dad, I have had speech one time the whole year. One time. Unacceptable. So I placed a call, actually the principal called me. I asked her, she referred me to Mrs. Porcello. When I find out, you've known Cassie Burkholder's going on maternity leave for 9 months now. 9 months, you know, Mr. Lillie. And we have no one to fill in. And when I asked Mrs. Porcello, when will my son be getting speech? She says, maybe Mr. Dubsky, he'll get it tomorrow. Maybe he won't. That was her response. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not letting this go. There's going to be complaints filed and attorneys contacted, and this is not over. Start doing your jobs. Dr. Treharn, you need to resign. You need to go. Your leadership here is terrible. Terrible. I'm done.
Chris Dodd, 400 Green Ridge Drive, Geneva, Ohio. I'm here to talk to you about one of the items on your agenda, actually number 4, your approval of a new gifted identification program. I too have children in this district. I have 4 currently. 2 of them have been identified as gifted since the 2nd grade. The fantastic teachers, and I'm gonna call it Ms. Cinco in the back, who absolutely helped identify and push my kids. Since then, this district, once my kids have been identified, has failed to service them. Not only have you failed to service them, you have regressed in the amount of services provided to them. There is no more gifted teacher in the middle school. I met with the middle school principal before school started. He has a plan. It is the best plan he can come up with given his circumstances. I do not blame him whatsoever. I blame the people sitting on that stage right there for not filling the empty position of a gifted teacher. I have been told for 5 years, just wait, we have a program coming. The old assistant superintendent was going to put one together, put gifted in the elementary. Never happened. Then I was told, wait till you get to middle school. Middle school teacher retired. And now my kids still do not have service. My child has read at a 10th grade level since he's been in 3rd grade, and the book he was assigned was a 4.7 reading level in his gifted class. That is an abomination and a huge disservice to my family, to my children's education. And then I ask, why am I keeping my children here if you continually cannot service them? What is keeping me here with my children? If this board cannot fill its positions, if it cannot live up to educating all of the students, why are you here? And why should we stay and continue to support these schools? This board needs to figure it out and fix this. You have kids on either end of the spectrum not being serviced. And then you have the ones in the middle being lost.
Excuse me, before you speak, Mr. Pearson, Dr. Treharn would like to respond to that.
So, Mr. Dodd, by law, as I'm sure you know, districts have to identify, they do not have to serve. So I can't speak to what happened or didn't happen 5 years ago, but I can tell you that it is our goal to service students this year, and we do have a plan in place to provide services for more students this year than were serviced last year.
I understand the law states you only have to identify. I get that. But you're regressing in the services that were provided last year. You are lacking a teacher in the middle school. You took away a program that the kids were using. My now 6th grade son does not have an enriched language arts. So whether or not they say you legally are responsible to service them, you are taking away services from them and you are regressing.
We will be providing services to students this year.
I'll be waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
Of course. Brock Pearson, 56 Erie Street. I wanted to let you guys know, looking at some of the busing issues that parents had, I figured I'd use my time as a childless 30-year-old to talk to someone who used to be a bus driver who likes driving diesel vehicles and say, hey, why aren't you with the school anymore? So when I talked to this person, they were pretty clear that there were a few things that were keeping them from coming back. And I wrote them down, so I'm going to try to pull them up here. But essentially it comes down to, when the strike happened, formerly there had been some type of construction, 2-bay, 3-bay, wash pad. I don't understand what it means, but that's where that story starts. This individual was talking to us about there had been a purchase order. Most of Geneva's buses are International brand, which is a highly renowned, pretty reliable brand of diesel motor. They also create some vehicles, semi-trucks, buses, things like that. And there had been a purchase order that had somehow gotten in the mix for a brand of buses called Thomas. And those Thomas buses don't use the same parts, and they're engineered differently than these other buses. It caused a lot of issues at the bus garage. One, people that had been trained on these for a long time didn't want to operate these Thomas buses because they're $9,000 to $12,000 less. They're a little bit harder to operate for reasons unknowing to me. But a lot of people wanted to stay with the International because they didn't go down as often. They're easier to fix, and Geneva has an entire room right now dedicated to fixing these buses. When these 4 buses got pushed through, there were a lot of issues with them, such as we had actually talked to some people at the garage about them going down and basically being laid up with purchase orders not pushed through to get these buses fixed for a long period of time. And so that caused issues. These buses were down, on top of the other issues with the drivers who were already frustrated with route paperwork. And I wanted to get into that before I finally close out. So the main points this person made was he'd love to come back, but he won't be. They said kids are at times put on buses without paperwork, including safety releases and drive plans. There were times this person went on the bus, he'd have to trust the kids to give them instructions on where to pick up or drop off. In some cases, the first child he talked to would be the first person he would drop off, but it would be like middle of the run. And so that caused a lot of issues for him. There wasn't really a clock in or out procedure. The way that the time was calculated was based on time scheduled and not worked. So to get overtime adjusted, you have to have 2 signatures. You have to throw it to the Pony Express, which is a van that goes between schools for people who don't know what that is. And then you have to wait for a reply, which at times doesn't always come through. He was also a little frustrated because the driver fronts all the costs of the CDL, including the background check, drug test, DOT physical, and then you receive 2 repayments, at least this was how it was pre-2019, receives 2 payments to recompensate them. And then he goes into the 2 to 4 Thomas brand trucks some drivers have not been trained on, and talks about at least, the Thomas trucks were kind of the beginning of the end for people being turned off. 6, he talks about a loophole between automatic and standard CDL certifications. I didn't quite understand this one, but I thought maybe it would be helpful to bring to your attention. There's a specific one you need to operate a bus. Some are retroactive for people who have been licensed and who have received their CDL, medical examination, what have you, in their endorsements. Some are not. Like I said, that's something to ask probably someone at the bus garage. And I just wanted to say, that was in a 20-minute phone call I made to someone sitting in the parking lot of Mary's Diner because I know that they drove buses and would drive again. I've also talked for people who left the district. They work for Jim Doherty Trucking now. Maybe they haul for Raymond Cutstone. If I were you guys, I'd reach out to them and ask them because he was at dinner with his mom and gave me 20 minutes of his time. It was very easy to figure out kind of what was wrong there. So thank you.
I have a question for you. Did you say that this person drove for us pre-COVID? And that was the last time they drove for us was pre-COVID?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and also, and even then, and I know salaries on everyone's minds, but when we did the calculation based on then and now, drivers can see at most a payment of around $560 per week, which is comparative for inflation, not even remotely attractive to get people out of here. Even though we have retirees that are probably really interested in driving, I don't think that in lieu of them trying to fill another position to get your guys' insurance benefits, which are nice, is enough to pull them in when they can realistically go drive part-time for someone else and make twice that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Michelle Craig, 200 Cherrywood Circle, Geneva, Ohio. The new Ohio School District report cards have recently been posted. Geneva got 3 stars out of 5 and is in the bottom third of districts overall. I don't know if all of you are aware, but there's 611 school districts in the state of Ohio. I'm sure we can all do the math. Dr. Hrina-Treharn was hired over a year ago, and according to an article published recently in the Star Beacon, has already received a double-digit percentage pay increase. Here's my question. What measurable improvements has Dr. Hrina-Treharn made in this past year that would reflect on that recent state report card? Anyone? I figured. I further ask, then how do you justify her pay increase? It's been nothing but mayhem here for a year. The second item I want to speak about is something that's a little near and dear to my heart as a kindergarten teacher. But I was told that there was a few kindergarten teachers here in Geneva that asked to purchase the Hegarty Phonics program. This program
I'm
was...
sorry, Mrs. Craig, can you spell that for me? Hegarty?
Hegggerty.
Thank you.
This program was designed by Dr. Michael Hegarty. He was trained extensively in phonological instruction with young children. He knew a lot about the DIBELS system. Teachers, early childhood teachers can tell you all about that. And they continually found that in their school that more and more of our early primary students were being considered for either Title I services or our early reading intervention services. It was also a growing concern that more of our kindergarten students were not coming to school prepared for beginning reading instruction, such as letter naming, rhyming, etc. The challenges of getting students ready for successfully learning the early reading skills were increasing, despite the fact that we had an excellent skill-based phonics program, as well as an abundant literature component in our literacy program. We committed to explore explanations for this ever-increasing need for additional reading assistance for our primary students. Why does this matter? I'm going to tell you why. This is 15 minutes a day. It's a complete book, a lesson plan for the entire year. When our kindergarten teachers wrote to get this approved, anyone want to guess? Denied. You got 3s on the state report card. She's gotten a double-digit raise. You're building a $1.8 million board office, and you can't buy a phonics program for our kids? What a waste. I brought my manual in case anybody wants to look at it and see what it is, and maybe figure out why in this world this was denied. 3 stars. This board is a joke.
Katie Sunderland, 6416 North Ridge Road West, Geneva. I am a Title I teacher over at GPS. I am working with students grade 2 to 3. I currently have 68 students out of those 2 grades that qualify for a RIMP, which is a reading improvement plan. I have at least 8 second graders that need to be remediated for letters and letter sounds, something they should have mastered 2 grades ago. Our intervention specialists and our Title I tutors are overwhelmed with the amount of students that we have to try to service and bring them up to grade level. We either need more help, because like other Title Is, I am being pulled out to substitute teach, which is, from my understanding, against the Title I law. I am there for those students, but I can't be. So I have to fit 68 students in every day, because there might be an off chance that the next day that I do have to substitute teach. So I am pulled from my students, the ones that need me the most, because we don't have adequate coverage and we don't have enough tutors. 30 minutes a day for some of these students is not enough. Not if we want to close the gap that came from COVID. We have the ESSER funds to hire tutors specifically to help with this, but we have not done it. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further speakers, we will move on. We would need a motion to approve the minutes.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And roll call, please.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
Yes.
And a motion for the treasurer's financial report.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
Motion to approve the invoices
Move.
Second.
and discussion. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
and Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
And Mr. Lillie, any informational items?
You see listed 2 donations from the same couple, Larry and Carol Wright, to the Geneva Schools cafeteria. One to be used for ice cream Fridays for kindergarten, the other to be used towards covering negative balances. Larry was a custodian at the middle school and then the high school who retired in 2012. I also wanted to note, the board, I reported last week that the county auditor had ruled on a Board of Revision hearing, or the Board of Revision had ruled that they would maintain the value on the Giant Eagle property. That has been appealed by the property owner, so they are taking that to the next step to see if they can reduce that value.
And I want to express my gratitude to Larry and Carol Wright for their donation to the schools. Thank you. Legislative report, Ms. Dixon?
Yes. It's very short. You'll all be happy about that. The recently enacted House Bill 110 contained an amendment to Ohio Revised Code. It appears to remove a school district's ability to conduct raffles. Specifically, the bill removed the term public schools, that's in quotes, public schools, from the list of entities that are authorized to conduct charitable raffles. I emailed Dr. Hrina-Treharn about this, and it was my understanding that it doesn't really impact us, as it's our boosters who do our raffles. We don't, as a school, do them, so that's what happened, but it doesn't impact us necessarily, and so that's my report. Thank you all.
Ms. Fisher, an ATEC report?
Yes, we had our ATEC meeting on Monday. We had, the school has started. We don't have a final count on the number of students because they're still joining, switching disciplines, dropping out because it's not what they anticipated it to be. But we are in the neighborhood of 640 kids at this point. There was a report on the OTES report for the 21-22 school year. 49 total evaluations were done, of which 26 were listed as accomplished, 22 were skilled, 1 was listed as developing, and there were no ineffectives. We're also going through an energy use audit. If you've ever been to ATEC facility out in Jefferson, you know it's widely spaced. There are a lot of different buildings. There are some buildings like the welding area and the heavy equipment that spend most of their time with the doors open. And so it does have an energy factor that can be kind of expensive. So we are having an energy audit done to see what there is that we can do to maybe tighten that up a little bit. And they're also doing a security audit, which is for the same reason as the energy, is a very complicated thing to accomplish there with all the different buildings, all the different doorways, back doors, front doors, side doors. So both of these are being taken care of over the next few weeks and priced out. We'll see how much that costs. And that's, oh, they had the Ashtabula County dinner for the, let me get it right.
Growth Partnership?
Yeah, no,
No.
it was for the Leadership Ashtabula Best of County. And they had their dinner last night, of which the YO program that ATEC is involved in for kids that have aged out of the school systems, and helping them with whatever they need in order to get on their feet, get trained, get into the workforce. And so ATEC was one of the groups honored for that accomplishment. And then next month in October, we're going to be having a dinner at ATEC to thank the stakeholders that have come forward to help provide jobs, provide trainers, insight, and to-do lists for various disciplines throughout the county. So we'll have a lot of the corporate leaders over for dinner. And then they'll break down into each unit, and the welding people will go, and the various disciplines will get together and have a sit-down, a brief session on what's going well and what needs to be improved and taken care of. So that's it.
Thank you.
Madam President, may I ask Ms. Fisher a question? Ms. Fisher, has there been any progress made on the CDL initiative?
No. There's a lot of interest but no action. It's one of these deals where people will say, oh yeah, I can see where that'd be needed, but we need so many acres of paved lot, and we need so many special instructors, and then we need certain machinery that they're like dummy simulators. And we have one, but it's so old we don't even know if it'll work. So there is talk going on, but there's no action at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Report of the superintendent this evening.
Our administrators will begin by providing a brief report, and we will start with Ms. Hrina.
Good evening, everyone. It's our September meeting. It's our back to school meeting every year, and we present our homeroom teachers by grade level and our numbers. So that's all on the front page there, and you can see our final enrollment numbers thus far this year. If you flip it over, you see our additional student numbers. It looks at our open enrollment students, how many students are core placed in, how many students are on IEPs or 504s, are at an alternate school placement, and then you see the trend in numbers over the years since 2011. We had our back to school open house, which was attended on August 25th. We had a great turnout. We started with our monthly PTO meetings in person. We're looking at planning field trips and family nights and other school events. We have an excellent addition to our staff this year, Mrs. Herder. She couldn't come at a better time for all of us. And we're excited to have student council return this year. Ms. Gurley will be leading that as our student council advisor, and we're looking at extended learning starting next week for grade 3. So that's where we're at to start the year, pretty standard. And then we're also dealing with, the loss of one of our colleagues this week. It's a really sad time for us. It's the second colleague that we've lost since the start of COVID. And we're just trying to process all that right now. And I give my teachers and staff a lot of credit because they show up each and every day and they put on a brave face for all our students right now. Mrs. Bryan was remembered dearly by everyone. She was in Geneva a really long time, like everyone said. And the funny thing is she would say over the years too, like she was starting to have her former students, like she taught in Geneva that long, and her former students would say, I had Mrs. Bryan and I want my child to have Mrs. Bryan. So she's just remembered fondly, and so, I mean, that's where we're at right now at GPS. We're trying to move forward and remember Annie and all that she did for us and then all that she did for the community. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Mrs. Brzenko.
Good evening. On behalf of the Augsburg Elementary staff, we would like to send our condolences to the Bryan family, and our thoughts are with you during this difficult time, as well as GPS and all the staff that has worked with her and her husband. To begin the year, Augsburg Elementary participated in Augsburg Country Days. Our PTO, my daughter and myself, walked in the parade with families and represented our school with pride, and it was wonderful to see all the families on the sidelines and waving and looking forward to the new school year. Also, our PTO had a mum fundraiser at Ohio Heritage Farms on September 10th, and I'd like to thank them for being so gracious and allowing us the opportunity to support our fundraising efforts. Next, the building participated in Constitution Day, which was September 17th, which was on a holiday, so we celebrated it early. Mrs. Capo, Mrs. Hollis, and Mrs. Cozy spearheaded the event for the building, and the students rocked out to Schoolhouse Rock, the Constitution Preamble, viewed slideshows of the United States Constitution for kids, and various resources. Mrs. Hollis' class created their own classroom constitution using PBIS as a cumulative activity, and I'd like to share that with you now because they really were having fun in there, shouting out answers and trying to make their own constitution. And it says, we, the students, in order to form a more perfect classroom, make this constitution for the second graders and to H. That's second grade, Mrs. Hollis. We will listen to our teacher, Mrs. Hollis, and we will try to be PACS leaders. We will do our classwork and our homework, and when we finish our work early, we will silently read and take out AR tests, and we will work quietly, raise our hands, and be respectful and kind to each other during recess, restroom, lunch, and specials, and we will follow directions and keep our hands to ourselves. We will soar like eagles, and each one of them signed the bottom of their own constitution, so I look forward to seeing how that progresses throughout the year.
That's great.
Lastly, moving on to your packet, I have broken down our enrollment as well by grade levels and other information for you to review. We are only down by 2 students from the previous year, and I've also included some of the positive messages around the building for you to see since you're not in there all the time. So there's some great things for you to see in there. And I also made the constitution that the kids watched the PowerPoint with your packet so that you can see that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next will be Mrs. Doherty.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm starting off our enrollment as we do every September with our numbers. So that's on the front page, and then our enrollment history is down at the bottom. You can see our numbers are building back up to as they were comparable to 2017-18. I also added on the bottom family history, and this was alluded to earlier. Families who a parent or parents that attended Cork and now their children are attending Cork as well, that we have up to 37 families. So it's just so nice to see that, and you're so proud to, have them come back with their kids. Some things that we're doing for our opening, I put on their opening. I cannot tell you enough. We say this every year. Custodial, cafeteria, everything was well prepared before we even went back. The teachers were there early August, if not sooner. The building was sparkling and just very welcoming, so I appreciate everything they do. And our open house was on August 25th. We had approximately 96% attendance. We had quite a few people there. It was very nice to see everybody. And of course, our secretaries, they do it all, and they are always ready to go. So Mrs. Ritchie, I can't thank her enough. Some new things we're doing this year, we have movement and intervention to go along with our social emotional learning and academic needs. We built into our schedule a morning recess in which students can have a brain break and connect socially while teachers can meet with individual students to assist with homework or mini lesson. But the students also receive their regular recess after lunch. So that seems to be going quite well. It's nice to give them another little break. We also celebrated Constitution Day, and that was again on Friday the 16th. And classrooms had many activities going on. They connected lessons with being a good citizen, which we're then going to connect with our soaring eagles. So we are excited to start that. I also included on there our open enrollment, and those numbers are, especially open enrollment they're up there, which is nice because that brings our numbers up, and it's nice to know that people want to come to our district. I also have included Court Place and our special ed students as well. Moving on, our drop-off pickup, as you know, every year we have to get creative with our drop-off and pickup because we're usually in the road. This year we have even more families picking up, dropping off. So we finally did have to switch our bus lane with our drop-off lane. Thank you to Char Leonard and all the bus drivers for their help. So that has been working out beautifully. I think we had one day we had a couple cars in the road, but we pulled them up. There's much more room. So it's a lot less stressful at the end of the day because that's very stressful when you have cars sitting way out there and you have the hill coming down and they're sitting right there. So I am very fortunate that Char helped out with that as well as the bus drivers giving me advice on that. And then we also have Head Start in our building. There's 19 students, very little ones. They're learning the ropes with coming to school. And we do have 2 teachers in there. Their hands are full. That's all I'm going to say. They're working really hard. So it is nice to give them that school experience. And we do have changes in staff. We have 2 new special ed tutors. Miss Abby Triscutt, she's grade K to 3, she covers those grades. And then Miss Emily Harriman, grades 4 and 5. They are brand new, and they were roommates at Teal College, and they are sharing the same room, so it's been really nice seeing their energy and their excitement, and they work very well together. And I'm going to read you something from Emily. I know I'm supposed to be up here short, but I think everybody needs to hear it. And then we also have Miss Cheryl Ramsey over from GPS. She's our title tutor this year, and she's very, very busy, as Mrs. Sunderland had mentioned. So I included the little bios for Emily and Abby on the back of that, and I would, if you don't mind, I would like to read Emily's bio. Emily grew up in Geneva and went to Cork Elementary growing up. She then graduated from Geneva High School in 2018. From there, she went on to Teal College in Greenville, Pennsylvania, where she was able to play both soccer and basketball and study early childhood and special education. She graduated this May with her Bachelor's of Arts in Education. She is certified to teach K through 5 regular education and K through 12th grade special education. She wrote this too. One huge reason that she wanted to become an educator was because of all the great teachers she had within Geneva schools. From amazing teachers, coaches, administrators, she knew that she wanted to make an impact on children's lives and their education like so many did for her in Geneva. It means the world for her to be able to be a part of a community like Geneva, and get to be back and give back where it all started for her as a child. And to know that now she has the ability to plant the seed like so many great people in Geneva did for her. She had many people trying to get her to apply to many other schools. Believe me, I know, we were fighting it. Especially and even here too, Mr. Weatherhold, I had to fight him back. But Geneva has always had her heart. She's so excited to make a difference in this community and to help her students grow as learners and people. Once an Eagle, always an Eagle. And so that just sums it up, and just what some things that she said could match Miss Annie Bryan as well. Just was there for her students, and I'm blessed that I got to work with her, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mollahan?
Good evening. I too want to start off recognizing my building real fast. So this week's been a very tough week, as everybody has said, and our building, when tragedy and sadness happens, it brings up a lot of sadness of what our building has dealt with in the past. And the other morning when I had talked to the staff to kind of let them know what was going on, and I have a few of my staff members here this evening, it's just a reminder of why I love what I do and I love where I'm at, because of the way that everybody picks everybody up. The amount of time that I've had a chance to interact with Mrs. Bryan pales in comparison to many of you that are in this room. But I just want to thank my building for helping me, because not afraid to admit it in front of everybody in this room, I became quite emotional, and you guys, it's a judgment-free zone. And I can't thank you enough, and I felt it was important that I recognize the people that are here in my building, here this evening. So, and Ms. Hrina, my building, my staff, Mr. George, and myself are just a phone call away. So, anytime. In this packet, it's quite lengthy. I included a whole ton of data that Mrs. Lamers and myself spent a lot of time in August going through. So if anybody up here, as you start to look through this over the next few days, if you have any questions or would like to speak to me about anything on here, please reach out to me and I will spend as much time as you guys need. But obviously, it's impossible to go through all this evening, but our building is hard at work. Our staff is hard at work to take what we have here and keep improving in the areas that we have improved in, and then make improvements in the areas that we're working hard to improve on. A couple highlights, though, that I want to end my time on. So in honor of the Grape Jamboree, that is this weekend, which, has been absent, obviously, so now it's back. I wanted to point out Mrs. Calusi, one of the activities that she is doing with her students, she is calling such a grateful bunch, where not just Mrs. Calusi, but all of the teachers in our building are working with our students on all sorts of things to help student engagement and to help kids connect. But I wanted to point hers out just because of how she's tying in the Grape Jamboree. So I've included some pictures of how she had her students write down things that they were grateful for, both either in school, also at home, and how they are arranging it in the shape of a grape, if you will. I also included some other pictures of some things that our teachers are putting up in the hallways, again, to send the message to our kids that, the middle school is one big family and we work every day to, make it as such. Stacy Zappatelli from ATEC was in our building today giving a presentation to our 8th grade students. And besides talking about ATEC, which she obviously does, her presentation to the kids is also about the idea of starting to think about your career, whatever your career is, and start thinking about the things we can start doing now as students to help prepare us for that career. So I will tell you, the kids were super excited. I had about 4 or 5 kids who a lot of times aren't afraid to tell me that school is boring to them and they don't want to be there. Made it a point to come to my office today to say that hearing Mrs. Zappatelli talk and hearing Mrs. Zappatelli tell a personal story about how her nephew struggled in school and how he was able to turn his life around. It's a story that she tells every year, how they really connected to it. So I can't thank Mrs. Zappatelli enough for coming out today and talking to our 8th graders. And it's all a big setup for when we go to, our 8th grade has their field trip to ATEC next month. And I also got news too that the county ATEC along with Kent State Ashtabula are joining together to provide a program for 6th grade students to go to Kent State Ashtabula to start getting a head start and thinking about future careers. So that is a field trip that is being set up for sometime in February, so look for that. Our GMS Parent Group, our parent group was started last year by Mr. Riley, is going strong. We've already met about 3 times since the beginning of August. We are planning a massive trunk or treat activity at the middle school. This will be a first for me. Never experienced a trunk or treat, so more details on that to come, and hopefully we can get everybody up here on stage to come by. We do have a DJ that is coming, so that'll sure be a good time. Middle school loves their DJs. And then, just like other principals have mentioned, our building also recognized Constitution Day. We talked about like 9/11. Our teachers did a great job working with our students with these various activities, and we recognize these, just as much as the other buildings. And then I think that's it, because I told everybody I wouldn't talk a lot this evening. So, thank you for your time, Mr. Weatherholt.
We are going to get you a watch. You're a little long again. You got 3 reports from me. There's 3 different things that I gave you. I'm not going to go over every one. I'm just going to hit on a couple things in each of them. I did look at the new state report cards on the stars for the high school. The high school did a little bit better than the district did. We actually placed second in the county. We tied with Edgewood with 14 points. We did notice that in there, one of the things was a graduation rate. We do know that there's probably about a 3 to 4% change in there, because we had 5 students go plus 23. They actually would have counted. They actually counted against us in that score, so that would have changed our score even more, and we would have had a little more growth there. I think that we did pretty well overall. Over the past 8 years, I've been here about 14 years. In the past 8 years, we've had a lot of cuts, and I do know this board has put some of those things back in place, and I'm hoping that the board will decide to put more positions back in place so that we can close that gap anymore and continue to strive to become number 1 in the county again. But although the high school did do a little better than the district did, that's not possible without the other buildings, the other staffs, and the other principals. So it's in my notes that I personally wanted to thank you guys, because we can't have the strides at the high school if those buildings aren't laying a foundation for us to build off of. So thank you guys very much for all you do. The next packet is, and if there's anybody from PBIS, a shout out to PBIS class. They decided to take on Geneva High School sports, and they put together a little package for you that is highlighting all our sports for the month. They plan on doing this every month. Not only are they doing this, but they have a TV up front, the 2 in the cafeteria, that they are running day-to-day announcements and things that are going in the building. And then they do have a TV on the side by the concession stands that they are turning into a sports channel, so that can play for the parents when they're at games and stuff. That just highlights things that are going on throughout the district. So I wanted to thank the PBIS class and the students. I don't know if any of you guys are in that class, but at least one, 2, at least one. So thank you guys very much for taking that challenge on and promoting yourselves and other students in a positive manner in the building. So thank you for all you do. The last one then is actually my report that I did. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. I highlighted all the positivities going on in the building. The one that I wanted to mention up front was Jen Crosley. Jen Crosley got some new mats put into the gym with donations. That project started about a year ago. In the last year, we spent a lot of time going back and forth and arguing what would be on that mat, what wouldn't be on that mat. And Jen took it all in stride, all the way down to the talons on the eagle claw, where her and I disagreed. She wanted yellow, and I said, nope, they're going to be clear. And Jen Crosley just smiled at me and said, thank you very much, Ms. Well, they are now clear. They turned out gorgeous. Thank you for all your hard work. Then I would like to tell a little story. Hopefully I can get through this quick. Brad Hunt's mother, Charlotte, worked for the district since she's been 18 years old. She's passed away. She graduated from Spencer High School. She loved Geneva, and she loved making pies and things for the kids. She made an Oreo cookie pie for the students and would send that in with Brad to share with his kids. She passed away, and one of the students asked Mr. Hunt for the recipe. This year, in her honor, the first day of school, that student made the pie for Mr. Hunt and presented it to him in front of the class. He was taken away by that act of kindness that he wrote me a letter about it, so it's in my board report too. I wanted to thank Susu for doing that for me. It really means a lot when students reach out to us. And then one last note, this was like the Brad Hunt paper of all times for whatever reason. I'd like to wish Brad Hunt good luck in the obstacle race world championship at Stratton Mountain Resort in Vermont. He is actually representing Geneva, or the United States of America, in the age bracket of 50 to 54 in that competition, so good luck to him.
Thank you. Mrs. Porcello?
Good evening. I'd like to start with recognizing Annie as well. I only worked with her for a short time. But what struck me was my husband's aunt. Her kids went to Geneva. Her youngest is 21, so it's a while ago. But she put up a post about Annie yesterday. And it really struck me because we as educators, we come here and we want to affect somebody. And it really stands out that Annie did. And I hope that we can all aspire to Annie's level and work for that. But it really did touch me that even Todd's aunt, who is far removed from Geneva at this point, felt a need to say something about Annie too, and the effect she had on her own kids and her personally. I believe they actually went to church together too. So that's it for Annie, and I'll get myself back together. Earlier this month, a number of the principals and myself sat through a 6-hour dyslexia training for the K-3 course that the state is going to be offering at the end of fall, whenever that might be. It was a good training. It taught us all how to get into the program when the course is released, showed us what the first page of it would look like. We don't know what any of the rest of it looks like. And then spent a long time going into the whys about this initiative for dyslexia. So I put some of that information in there. And I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Dubsky's comments about the speech pathologist. Yes, we are short a speech pathologist. Yes, we've known that Mrs. Burkholder was having a baby. No, we didn't wait until last week to try to find a substitute. We have been searching high and low, under chairs and backyards, anywhere we can find.
You went on record June 1st and told us in a meeting that the plan B was in place and we had it covered. So if you're going to address me, I'm going to address you back.
We have been searching. I did speak to 2 parents this evening before coming back here for the board meeting, who have also given me a couple other places to look that I'll be searching out tomorrow. Just things we haven't thought of. So if you know somebody, if you have any inklings of somewhere that we can look, please let us know. We're here. You can call me. I'll call you back. I'll email you back. We're looking. We are for sure looking to find somebody. And I know...
I'm sorry, Mr. Dubsky, the hearing of the public was earlier, and we'll have another... She's actually addressing the board, if you need to address this later.
The job has been posted for a few months, yes. We've posted it on the Ohio Department of Education job board. It is posted on Indeed, which puts it on multiple other job boards as well as the Ohio Department of Education places it many places as well. I have personally spoken to all of Ashtabula County school districts, as well as many in Lake County. All of the ESCs, Lake County, Ashtabula, Geauga, which are combined at this point, and Cuyahoga County ESCs, Trumbull County ESC, in our search. I am trying not to leave any rocks unturned in finding somebody. We're looking at alternate ways to provide these services at this point. Hopefully we find somebody soon. And I also wanted to give a huge thank you to our school psychologists, John Kubek and Tracy Stagg. They work tirelessly to ensure that our students are evaluated whenever a need arises, and I appreciate everything that they do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Riley?
Good evening. Before I get to my report, one of the reasons that drew me to Geneva last year when I came was the compassion of the staff and the community as a whole. And oftentimes when we lose, when we have a loss of life, whether it's a student or an adult or whomever, everybody bands together and pulls together. They support one another. That's when they truly show that the caring and the compassion really comes out. So for my colleagues this evening, it's not surprising to hear the reactions of the staff and how they want to help one another, help the buildings, help the family. That speaks volumes for this community and the staff here. Again, that was one of the reasons that I came, and certainly offer my condolences to Mrs. Bryant's family. But these are challenging times, and we'll kind of move our way through it the best that we can as a group. For my board report this evening, just to highlight, we had several of our students, actually 22 of our students, participate in the Gifted program over the summer out at the ESC of Ashtabula County. It's called the Allegro program. And essentially, this year's theme was Brains at Work. And the students went through a litany of activities such as robotics and visual arts, a course called Living Like a Mathematician, even some creative writing. So they do a nice job, and to have 22 of our students go out there and participate for that was very good to hear. Many of my colleagues talked about Constitution Day. It's recognized yearly around September 17th, and the reason that we do it really is that any building or districts that are receiving federal funding, we must do something to recognize Constitution Day. I think in many cases, whether you're receiving federal funding or not, you just do it, because it's the thing to do. So we truly appreciate all of the efforts that the staff and the administrators did with that. I did provide them with a list of resources, but in many cases they had already had some resources from prior years that they would pull out, and they just keep making them better and better each year to work with the students. From a state testing standpoint, we are in the final stages of creating a testing calendar, which we'll be getting out very shortly. I will be going around to the buildings next week as a part of the one of the outcomes, I suppose, is by October 1st, there must be a mandatory meeting for those with the staff, for those that will be administering the fall tests. So we're going to be taking care of that next week as I kind of move out into the buildings. And quite a bit of work has gone through for the professional development day that is scheduled for this Friday. Multiple sessions are going to be offered. We've done some tweaking since we initially thought what we were going to be doing. But the sessions we're going to offer is one session everybody will go through is on gifted, writing written education plans and written acceleration plans. We're moving into the Same Goal program. The Same Goal program is the online resource that they use for writing 504s and even IEPs here in the district. There's actually modules in there for the WEPs and the WAPs to be written. Having our staff do that, it'll streamline the process to be able to electronically communicate with parents back and forth and provide us a record in the system rather than a paper trail somewhere along the way. So it'll look a little different for the staff because they're used to doing them on Google Docs. But now having them in this system, it's the same layout, it's the same verbiage, everything looks exactly the same. It's just going through a different electronic medium. In an effort to kind of get that part rolling to help out the staff, I set up templates of the written education plans and the acceleration plans. They're already in the system for the staff. I've already connected those staff members that would be assigned to writing the goals already in the system. Pretty much on Friday, all they're going to really need to do is get into the system and start going through that. And we'll have Denise Hunt here to help them move through that. But in addition to the gifted, we also have our administrative team is going to go through some data analysis with their respective buildings, and we've created, there was a litany of choices that they could do, kind of created a choice board activities. So the staff can, in their buildings, they'll be going through, they may be talking about family engagement, maybe student engagement. They could be talking about depth of knowledge or writing rigorous assessments. So the administrators are going to take them through some of those sessions along the way as well. And finally, on my end, just appreciation and gratitude for the counselors here. in the district, not only what they've been dealing with this week, but as we've been trying to work with the state testing calendar and getting ready for their professional development day have been phenomenal, and also the administrators for their support as we kind of work through a litany of topics over the last few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Riley, I have a quick question about Allegro. How does a student get referred to that program?
To my knowledge, I believe it's just posted online, maybe through word of mouth. I don't recall anything coming my way or to the building level last year, but I do notice that several of the students that are on that list were at the middle school last year. So there must be an online version or promoted through the county in some manner.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
So next, moving on to the agenda, we have a list of policies that are up for review and board adoption. Just keep in mind that this is the first reading of the policies listed in agenda item number 2, and then it won't be until October that you will formally approve them.
Okay, the superintendent recommends that the board waive the first reading and adopt the following new revised policies due to technical changes.
Moved.
Second. And discussion?
So the technical changes really are just, these are all of the policies that would have listed Mr. Liebert in them, and so it was a change of name from Mr. Liebert to Mr. Riley. That's the only change in those policies.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes. The superintendent recommends approval of the enclosed gifted identification service plan for the 22-23 school year.
Move.
Second.
And discussion?
I just want to say that this plan is much more comprehensive and informative for parents especially who may have questions about gifted and gifted services and identification. And once this is approved, hopefully approved this evening, Mr. Riley will get this posted on our website.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
and Mrs. Milliken Dixon.
Yes.
The superintendent recommends the approval of the attached aquatic center use agreement with Spire in regards to team practices during the 22-23 school year.
Moved.
Second.
And any discussion?
I have a quick question. We have 2 copies. Are they the same?
As I mentioned when you passed it out, the one that was in your packets had been delivered to everybody or administration from Spire. The second one, we were able to get the price down, so I asked that you replace the one in
that's
your
what you meant.
packet with this one.
So, okay.
So the one that you are being asked to approve has a cost of $1,687. The one that you're replacing had a cost of $1,912.50.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? And roll call, please.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
and Mrs. Ortiz.
Yes.
The superintendent recommends that the board approve the enclosed memorandum of understanding between the Geneva Area City School Board of Education and the OPC Local 307.
Moved.
Second.
And discussion?
This would allow us to utilize staff from other departments who do hold the proper CDL to drive buses, and I certainly appreciate OPC's willingness to work and help out when possible.
Dr. Treharn, I have a quick question about the logistics of that. So, let's say, I can't think of a position, but a housekeeper wants to substitute drive a bus that day. Then who does his or her duties? How does that sort of?
So they would still do their job for a portion of the time, but yes, they would be leaving that for a portion of the time as well.
Okay,
And
thank
then
you.
they would go back to it, depending on if it was morning or afternoon and what their shift was.
Perfect, thank you.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
and Mr. Arndt.
Yes.
The treasurer recommends approval of the appropriations as presented for fiscal year 22-23.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Metzler,
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
and Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
The treasurer recommends the following fund be appropriated according to the adopted budget.
Move.
Second.
And discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon,
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Arndt,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
and Mrs. Metzler.
Yes. The treasurer recommends that the board approve the disposal of the attached list of assets.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
This is just a short list of some additional technology items that Mr. Brigard recommended. I would tell the board, when we approved the previous list, that Mr. Brigard has not had the time to put any of that stuff, those disposed items on the auction list yet, so we will continue to be working towards that.
Is the plan to put any of these on the auction list?
I don't know the status, that'd be a question for Mr. Brigard, but anything that would have value, he would be putting on there. And in some cases, even if it has scrap value, he would be putting it on there.
Okay.
I could say in speaking with him, he does not intend on putting any of them up. He said that they're too old or obsolete or have reached their end of life. I think he's just looking to dispose them at this point.
Okay. Any additional discussion? And roll call, please.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Milliken Dixon.
Yes.
The superintendent recommends the board approve the disposal of 170 football jerseys and 25 softball jerseys that are no longer of any use to the district.
Moved.
Second.
And any discussion on this? Okay, roll call.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
The superintendent recommends that the board approve authorization to pay a one-time stipend to employees that acquire Google certification.
Moved.
Second.
And discussion?
Certainly, tech integration has been and will continue to be a focus in our district. So this would just provide staff and kind of an incentive to obtain it. We will also cover the cost of them, or I should say we will reimburse them for the cost of the test if they pass the test, as well as provide them with the stipend. The level 1 certification basically just hits the fundamentals of Google tools, and level 2 more so deals a little bit deeper, as well as integration of those tools.
I have a question. How does this affect somebody that's not in a public school system, who's not an employee? I mean, does the average consumer have to pay to take this course? Or to get qualified in level 1 and level 2?
Yes.
They do.
If you would like that certification, yes, you would have to pay as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question as well. So then what does that certification, how does that help? If our employees get that, what does that do for their skill level, or how does that?
So obviously, they would have an increased knowledge level when it comes to tech and tech integration. As far as the certificate, I guess I would liken it to, you get another credential added on, and they do provide you a little Google certified icon, if you will, that, people typically would put on the bottom of their emails to let others know that they have reached that level of Google certification. There's actually additional levels above that. You could be a trainer, but we are just kind of looking at levels 1 and 2 at this point.
Do we have anyone currently certified?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
And Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
The superintendent recommends that Ralph Penn be hired as a temporary director of maintenance transportation.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? And roll call, please.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
And Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
The superintendent recommends the following personnel actions for the 22-23 contract year.
Moved.
Second.
And any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
And Mrs. Metzler?
Yes. We've arrived at the second hearing of the public. The same rules apply as applied earlier for a total of 30 minutes, 5 minutes per speaker, and please state your name and address for the record. Thank you.
Good evening. Mary Allison, 5076 Lake Road East, Geneva, Ohio. I am also the OPSI Union President for 307. We just received, I don't understand how you can vote the Memorandum of Understanding through. When we just received it yesterday, there was a discrepancy on the dates, and I sent it to our rep because one date, it was a totally different date on the first page as to the second page of the memorandum. We also need 48 hours to notify our union reps, or all our union members, I should say, so that they can come and vote on it and then let you know if it passed or not. So I'm very confused in how you're putting the cart before the horse, so to speak.
So I was actually in email communication with both you and Cheryl about this, letting you know that it was going on the board agenda this evening. She said it looked good, so if there's a discrepancy, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of that, but I'm happy to fix it if there's a discrepancy. And yes, we are well aware that it still needs to pass through the vote when you are able to get your members together, as she stated in the email.
Okay, because our union rep will be contacting you about the discrepancy of dates, because it says it goes through, I think, 2 years or something on the first page, but then when I read it on the second page, it ends at the end of this school year.
It does end at the end of this school year, so if
Okay,
there is
so
an error, I'm
whatever's
happy
on
to
that
fix it.
first page then is not right.
Okay.
No, Mary, I think what you're looking at is on the first page, it just mentions that we currently have a collective bargaining agreement that's effective from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024. And then this is being put in place for the remainder of the 22-23 school year. Those are the only dates listed. 22-23 is throughout at the bottom of page 1 and on page 2. So I don't know if there's just a misunderstanding that it's referencing the current negotiated agreement and its duration.
But it would still end then at the end of this school.
Correct.
That's how it reads.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, Kevin.
May I ask a question about that? So then what happens if the OPSI members don't approve it? Procedurally, just what happens? It goes back to?
Then we would not.
It doesn't go.
It doesn't carry through.
We
Correct.
approve it, they approve it, doesn't matter what order. If one or the other doesn't, then we.
Right, we both
doesn't
have
go.
to approve
Okay.
it, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Brock Pearson, 56 Erie Street, Geneva, Ohio. Real quick, I want to highlight, sometimes we have these conversations more like monologues, unfortunately, through email and here. The discussion about Google is very disheartening. It's disheartening for a few reasons. One, there was a pandemic 2 years ago, and during that pandemic, a lot of the people were sent home with no instructions. It was chaos. Everyone went through it. I know that. And I'm not saying that maybe we should have implemented it then, but maybe we should have been a little bit more aware of how Google works. It's the front page of the internet. That's like, it's been called that since 2008. You can go on Google and you can say, how do I use Google Classroom? And you guys will go to the certification program that you're talking about. And what it does is it shows you easy and accessible ways to share Google documents as you guys do your press releases and your PDF shares and information to the district. That's been commonplace in your guys' district since I went to school and used Adobe and Google as well. So I guess I graduated, 13 years ago, and when someone asks a board of people making decisions based on policy about a product that is used not only at home, but in the general vicinity of education, I used it in college. My brother is using it now for engineering CAD design, and I had to relearn that aspect of it. It is very easy to go and learn these things. It is very disheartening, for myself, to see that in 2020, when I my mom bought a brand new laptop for herself, a teacher at Ossenberg, and I sat down and went through the certification materials that I had myself paid for and showed her how to set this up. she was ready to go, to the point where other teachers in other districts had reached out and asked me if I could help them too. And I was, of course, happy to help them. But this district didn't implement it now. So the credibility issue comes down to now we're asking to incentivize our teachers to learn the utility that you have, as a board, asked them to use since 2020. Seems like I don't know if you guys have a handle on what's going on at your schools.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Herrick, 4567 Wood Road in Madison. So two things. The first thing, I was told that there was a quote-unquote training for the teachers on these smart boards. Something that I heard from one of the teachers was that this was more of a, do you have any questions on the smart board, and not more of a how-to. If there would be the opportunity, I know the teachers don't really understand how to use them. They are having some issues with them. And I think that they could be a very valuable tool that they could use, but I would recommend maybe doing more of a how-to, like give them different things that they can do rather than asking, oh, well, like, what do you want to know? Because if they don't know anything about them, that doesn't really help them. Also, I heard from one of the teachers at the high school. My mom is a teacher at the middle school and did not hear about this, so I'm just asking if this is rumor or if this is actually going to happen. With the refurbished laptops that they got, if they are going to be expected when we have snow days to use them to do remote days. That's a rumor that I heard. Before it comes up out of nowhere in the winter, is that something that is being discussed that may happen or not?
I don't have an answer for you on that, but thank you for asking the question.
Take a moment to suggest that if we are seriously moving forward with the construction of a new board office, that maybe the board needs to take a moment to consider building for our students first. The community, we need something to get behind right now. And I truly believe that the construction of a board office and a sports complex together could be something that we really, really need right now for our community and for our students. Currently, my son is involved in the Geneva Youth Program for football, and we've been going around to the different communities, going to their football facilities. Some of them are very elaborate, and some of them are very simple. But when I walk away, the thing that I notice is that it's theirs. It belongs to the school. Spire is a beautiful facility, but it's not ours. We have no ownership to it. I work the away gate side at all of our home football games. People come up and always compliment. The facility is gorgeous, but why isn't it at your school? I can't give them any good answer as to why that is. So I ask you, please, if we put something out in front of this building, it's going to be an eyesore. It's going to be something that as a community, we point at and we say why. If we can try to put something together that is for our students and for our community, I think in the end that would be much better money well spent, and it will help bring this community together. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the other. Is there anything for other?
Yes. A reminder about emergency medical forms. Again, I want to remind parents and guardians to please complete your emergency medical form for your child. It's imperative that we have this information should there be an emergency, that we know who to contact in that situation. Just an update on the YMCA. Our numbers are continuing to grow. They are in the process of hiring a site administrator for GPS, which will be the second site that we will open. They are telling me that this should be finalized within probably the next 3 weeks. So as soon as the site administrator is hired, we will be able to have initially 6 students there until they hire a second person. And then, of course, much like Austinburg, that number can go up. Just as a reminder also, if anyone is in need of financial assistance, that you can apply through the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, and the district is covering both the cost of registration for that program as well as snacks. Busing, I know I've gotten a lot of comments or emails or correspondence when it comes to busing. We were supposed to have yesterday a Topic Tuesday with the topic of transportation, and unfortunately, due to a family emergency with our bus supervisor, we had to cancel that. So we will be rescheduling that, but just to make a couple points about busing, obviously our goal is to provide transportation in a safe and timely manner for students. I did put out the transportation survey. We had 317 responses, which was great to see. From that information, it appears that approximately 25% of parents are saying that they are able to transport their child in the morning, and approximately 20% are able to transport their child after school. So I have passed along that information to Mrs. Leonard, and she will be going through it. So there are no changes, just to be clear, no changes being made at the moment. Once she can get through that information and see if it will help us, you know, whether it's decreasing the amount of runs or students on a bus or trips or routes, certainly we will put out communication about that. Certainly there is frustration, I'm sure, on the parents' end. There's frustration on our end, as you know, many businesses and schools are certainly struggling with finding employees right now. It was reported that in the state of Ohio, districts are starting the year with 17,000 fewer people working in K-12 education. That's an alarming number to me. And most glaringly in that number is the decrease in the number of bus drivers. There is another district that was reported in the newspaper who had 100 bus drivers last year, and they have 75 drivers this year. So this is not specific to Geneva. This is a plethora of districts that are in the same situation and struggling to find drivers. We have reached out to, Mr. Riley and I have reached out to a variety of places. Trucking companies thinking, okay, well, if someone drives a semi-truck, we know that they have to have a CDL. Obviously, it's a different CDL than you need for a bus, but maybe they would want to pick up part-time or extra hours. Did not fare well with gaining any potential employees there. We contacted another place out in Austinburg who reportedly had 10 part-time drivers. We passed along our information. None of them were interested as well. We spoke with a temp agency. There is a significant charge if they find someone for us to hire, but they did not have any people at the moment. We also reached out to private busing companies, and the rate, one of the rates that I was quoted was $65 an hour, minimum of 6 hours, and they would like us to book out the people a week at a time. And as high as those rates seem, I was also told that they don't even have any drivers to give us if we wanted to pay those prices, because everyone else is already paying them. So there is definitely a shortage of drivers. And again, as obviously it was on the agenda, we are trying to work with OPSI to try and put an MOU into place so that we can utilize some people who are in different classifications but hold a CDL, that if we need them, we can utilize them if they would be willing to drive that day. Obviously, as you know, because you see the postings every morning and sometimes in the afternoon, we are combining buses, using group stops, doubling up, to try and still be able to transport our students to and from school. So we started out the school year with 17 drivers. We had one assume a position still within the district, but a different classification. So we are at 16 drivers, and that does certainly not include anyone who might be taking a personal day, a sick day, who might be out on leave right now. And so, yes, we certainly fully are aware and realize that transportation is a struggle right now. We certainly I appreciate patience with this as we continue to get creative and find ways to help the situation. But the situation is what it is, unfortunately, right now. And again, much like Mrs. Porcello reported, in trying to find a speech therapist, it's not for a lack of trying. We're just not finding people. So I will say it again, if anyone knows anyone, please send them to us, because we would happily take them through the process and get them what they need to be certified to drive buses for us. Grants, I do have 2 grants to report on. I was able to secure $400 from the Health Action Council for our high school garden. I can also report that we got word that we received the water bottle refilling station grant that Mr. Riley had applied for through the EPA. It was in the amount, we were awarded $4,461.03, which I believe was the full amount that he had requested. So thank you for your work in applying for that for us. We recently held our first Portrait of a Graduate meeting. We had a nice mixture of stakeholders, including teachers, parents, a student who will be on the committee, but he had a soccer game that night, administrators, a board member, and community member. So we started by going over the results of a survey that I had put out last spring about what characteristics and skills you would want a student who graduates from Geneva to possess. And we went through those, and we are trying to limit those down to probably 5 or 6. We think we have it narrowed down to about 6, but we have a little bit more tweaking to do with that. We have our students who will be creating the visual graphic to go along with that, and we are happy with the progress that we made and look forward to continuing those meetings. Speaking of graduation, Mr. Weatherholt has informed me that we have confirmed our graduation date for this year, which will be June 4th at 2 p.m. So that is definitely earlier than we have had that in the past, so we are happy about that.
Thank you, Mr.
Lastly,
Weatherholt.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I just want to thank you real quick. Thank you.
Lastly, I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the state report card that was released on September 15th. We did score a solid 3 across the board, which means that we are meeting the state standards in all areas. I was particularly happy to see that GPS scored a 5, which means significantly exceeded state standards in the progress component. We scored a 4 in achievement at Austenburg and Cork, which the descriptor or definition of that is exceeding state standards. The high school also scored a 4, as Mr. Weatherholt was reporting about how well the high school did. They scored a 4, also exceeding state standards in both progress and gap closing. So I think that we have numerous areas to celebrate, but of course we also have room to grow and improve in other areas such as gap closing and making growth with some of our students. So I appreciate the work that our staff has done, and we will certainly continue to work to grow and improve.
Anything else from any of the other board members this evening?
Yeah, I'd like to comment real quick. Mr. Weatherholt, I want to thank you for mentioning the hygiene supply drive at the high school. I appreciate that so much. I want to give a shout out to Robin Christopher, who was also my partner in crime with that. So thank you, Robin. That's all I have.
Okay, and we need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call?
Mrs. Ortiz?
Yes.
Mr. Arndt?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Mrs. Metzler?
Yes.
And Mrs. Milliken Dixon?
Yes.
Thank you all for your attendance this evening.
Ella, now you can come up.
Just in time.
8:29. Get up there and get your thing.